Welcome to the video portion for the Family Law Review course for 2013. And it's really a pleasure to have you joining me and my friend Steve Wagner. Today we're going to talk about a couple of different areas. We're going to open by talking about practice under the new request for order procedure. Now we all know that it used to be BFD to your OSC and now it's LMAO to your RFO, but we do know that there are some practical changes. So let's talk about what a couple of those are. And the first is the creation of a new set of forms. So I want you to take the time to have a copy of the FL300 in front of you, and if that means you need to pause the video to do that, why don't you just go ahead and do that right now, and then we'll rejoin here in a second. Now that you have the FL300 in front of you, I want you to look at the bottom third of the quadrant of the form, and I want you to look at the top third of the quadrant of the form, and you're going to see that this is a hybrid of the old OSC and the notice of motion. The top third of the form looks principally like the notice of motion, whereas the bottom third of the form looks principally like a order to show cause. And there are some very important features to that bottom third of the form, particularly with respect to what box you check, including whether or not the other side is ordered to physically appear in court. Now in the old OSC form, we know that the language said you are ordered to appear and show cause why. But under the new form, we've added this box that says you are ordered to appear. So the question becomes whether or not that constitutes an order of appearance that can be enforced by contempt, or an order for you to appear and show cause in the way that was normally done under OSC practice, which is to say that you could file a response in writing to the request. There's no case that answers this question yet. There's lots of anecdotal history about parties simply appearing by the filing of papers, and of course the question becomes whether or not you can force someone to appear who's out of state. I think the better view there is you can't force someone who's out of state to appear in person. If you look at the form that the Judicial Council developed for the FL300, it says right on its face, the form that they developed for the self-represented litigants, if you want the person to be required to appear in court, check this box. Of course, a Judicial Council form doesn't constitute legislation. It's simply to enunciate what is supposedly the requirements that are set forth in the form. So clearly we know that we now have a unified procedure where the motion and the OSC are together. We also know that there are some additional forms that are available to us, and we want to be sure that we're using those forms. We also want to be aware of the fact that some of the new rules put limitations on how long our declarations can be. And that's really one of the hardest things for us as lawyers, isn't it, to write a 10-page declaration instead of a 50-page declaration?
Mark Twain once said, if I had had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. And it takes time to be brief and to the point. It also helps you focus on your case, and if you take that time, you're doing a better job lawyering, and you're more likely to have the court read with interest what you're putting in your declarations and points and authorities.
And so one of the things that we want to be aware of is that if we use the Judicial Council forms under the California Rules of Court, that doesn't count to the 10 pages. So what's the practice tip here for our lawyers with respect to the use of these Judicial Council forms?
I think you use the forms. I think when you have the ability to use an attachment, you should do so, because the court is certainly used to looking at attachments. And when you're writing your declarations or your points and authorities, I think it is very helpful to have headers for paragraphs. If you're asking for fees and you're asking for support and you're asking for exclusive use of the family residence, let's have the court be able to tune into that section that address spousal support, that which address fees, that which address the house, so that the court can get the gist of what's being said. And I prefer, and I try to make my 10 pages really only about 8.5 or 9 pages, so that I can do a 1-page summary.